let's do all the audio, and let's look at the A-Tub video because his videos are well structured and there's somebody else yapping, so it's going to be better for my YouTube video. Massive, the most disturbing dark web related deaths. Ooh.
Deaths. Hey guys, welcome back
Keep
to
it
another
mysterious.
video.
Wow.
Before this one starts, I do want to let you guys know that I have a second channel. Now, on my second channel, that is where I post my streaming clips, but as of late, some of the clips have gotten a lot of views. So I just wanted to let you guys know, if you want to see more of my opinions on topics, you can head over to the channel named Tubbington, obviously after you're done with this video, but specifically whenever I go over subreddits on that channel. People really enjoy that series. Oh yeah, and also all of my videos
I like his
are now
videos. His
on
videos are really
Spotify.
good.
My Spotify account is named TuvYT, YT standing for YouTube. So if you want to watch my videos over on Spotify, be my guest. Now,
I
today
remember
we're gonna be
asking the
talking
same thing
deaths
too
that
about
occurred due to the
Moist's
dark web.
videos,
Now,
but yeah.
what do I mean by that?
I see a
Well,
lot
it's
of like
self-explanatory.
big streamers and
Basically,
YouTubers like
these are
have their
from
like
hitmen
videos on
to drugs bought
Spotify.
off the dark web to simply even harassment that led to. We will be diving deep into some tough topics in this video. And with that being said, let's get started with the topic.
Ooh.
Gamer kid lured into dark web forum, got bullied to death. What if I told you a 15-year-old kid sat down to play Grand Theft Auto one evening, saw a pop-up offering free
GTA, yeah.
in-game credits, clicked it, and that single click set off a chain of events that would end his life. This was Christoforus Nicolau, though we'll just call him Christopher as everyone around him called him. He was 15, from Walton Cross in Hertfordshire, England, and by every account, this wasn't a troubled kid. He had an IQ of 140, sat at the top of his class, and had his whole future mapped out. He wanted to be an architect. His dad, George, described him as the kind of kid who lit up every room he walked into. His mom, Areti, said 2 days before everything went wrong, he was asking about flights to Greece and stressing over his upcoming exams. That's the kind of kid we're talking about here. So here's where it starts. January of 2022, Christopher's playing GTA when a pop-up appears on his screen.
Don't
Here
have
are
no
free
add-ons.
in-game credits,
Unlucky.
just fill out this form. Now, when it comes to GTA getting pop-up ads, that's not really a thing. So
Yeah,
either
it doesn't
Christopher
happen.
was
It never
playing on
happens.
a custom server or simply had a virus. Either way, what happened happened. So he types in his full name, his home address, his phone number, and his passport details. That pop-up redirected him
passport
straight into a dark
details?
web forum. And the second he hit submit, that was it. Within moments, a
GG,
message
bro.
came through. Complete a series of challenges, otherwise your family gets killed. Now, to an adult, maybe that sounds like an obvious scam or someone pulling your leg in a not so funny way. But Christopher was 15, and these people now had his home address.
You know what the saddest thing is? Because of these things that happened like years ago, I'm assuming this happened like before like 2012 or around that time. You're literally taught in school, like the first year you go in like uni and colleges, the first thing they do is teach you like online safety. Like it's a mandatory thing and everyone has to attend. Otherwise they like cut your grades or like 20, you lose like 10% of your grades or something. I don't remember what it is. It's mandatory now for every like college and like high school to teach online safety. Your whole identity?
His parents' names, and his passport number. And poor Christopher really believed that something bad was going to happen. The challenges
You're the
started
only
small,
one that can
almost
sit by a
laughably
campfire.
small, like eat a bowl of cereal within a set time frame, run backwards up the stairs, but then they escalated with things like stay awake all
Yoink.
night or watch horror films until morning and film the inside of the entire house with his phone, and eventually his own body and send a video. They were also sending him pictures of knives asking which one they should use to hurt his family. This went on for 50 days, and the entire time
Okay.
investigators believe he was given was to deactivate all the security cameras in the house. On the evening of March 1st, 2022,
Okay, but how would they know his login to his security cameras though? Like, how would they even know if it's active or deactive?
at 8:21 p.m., Christopher submitted his school homework online. At 9:25 p.m., he asked his dad if he could play for a bit. By 9:35 p.m., he was gone. His parents found him with an earpiece still in his ear and his phone on the floor. The moment they picked
Earpiece?
it up, a message came through on the screen that said, "Are you dead?" When police returned his phone and computer, they said they couldn't find anything. It took George himself 10 minutes to find the Discord account. And yes, there was one IP address. Investigators believe Christopher may have been talking to a single predator, playing multiple characters, possibly part of a larger organized network known as COM, short for community. Groups of online actors who recruit members and coerce victims as young as 9 into harmful acts for clout. By the way, I'm sure the community wasn't just named COM. From being in a lot of internet communities myself back in the
Okay,
day,
but how is this clout though? How is this clout? What part of this is clout?
I do know that every COM calls themselves COM, so they're like, oh yeah, he's a part of the COM. And you could be talking about the music scene, you could be talking about meme pages, you could be talking about the YouTube scene, like it's just COM.
Yeah, it's just like a reference being like, oh, he's part of the community instead of saying He's part of what community? Just say he's part of the com because it's supposed to be like contextual, but yeah.
So, more food for thought there, I guess. The NCA has described these networks as one of the UK's biggest criminal threats. Nobody has ever been charged for what happened to Christopher. At 11:06 a.m., after Christopher died, someone remotely accessed his Microsoft OneDrive and deleted everything. George and Aretti now run the Christophorus Charity Foundation, going into schools, talking to kids and parents about exactly this. Because the thing that keeps George up at night now is how easy it was, just one pop-up, and then they owned his boy. And while we are on the topic of internet safety, I do want to remind you guys that talking to people always helps. If you're going through anything, whether it be in school or online, please make sure to talk to an adult about it. I understand that not
I just reminded, it's like a brain blast, bro. Something very similar happened to me and my brother on like Facebook. Some random person DM'd me and my brother, and it started typing for us and sent a message, and it was doing it by itself. Me and him got so spooked, we literally had to go call our dad, and he was like, and nothing happened. He was like, just block the account. And we blocked it, and he's like, yeah, good. That's it. That's how that ended. He was like, the one thing we were told was like, unless you know the person who DM'd you, let me know, and then you can talk to them. It was like the rule. You don't have to talk to anybody unless you know them.
everyone has their parents around, but you can also
The only thing, bro, who remembers the games on Facebook? Oh,
talk to a school counselor, just a trusted adult.
That's the
Please
only thing
do
I've
not
ever used
bottle
Facebook
everything
for.
up. With that being said, let's head on to the next story. 2 U.S. Navy servicemen overdosed on dark web fentanyl.
what?
It's funny how little we worry about the logistics when we shop online these days. Most people are totally fine not knowing the where or how of their delivery. Just a seller name or a shipping label, or even just a tracking number is usually enough. But for 2 U.S. Navy officers stationed in Kingsland, Georgia, what arrived in their mailbox in October of 2017 came disguised as something completely ordinary, but of course, they knew what was in there. The packages were labeled East Van Echo Tours, like a travel company, something completely harmless. Inside was fentanyl, and both men died from it. So how did this happen? It was one of those dark web delivery tactics for illegal stuff, drugs and all, and this particular operation behind their packages had been hiding in plain sight for years. Thomas Michael Federick, 59 years old, lived in West Vancouver, British Columbia. His alleged partner, Paul Anthony Nichols, age 44, a British citizen, was also living at a West Vancouver address at the time, despite the fact that his visa had already expired. Together, they allegedly ran one of the more sophisticated dark web drug trafficking operations law enforcement had seen coming out of Canada, operating under the vendor name Canada One. The Canadian part of the name was mostly just a formality because their operations had eventually expanded well past the national line. They were importing drugs sourced from China and Hungary, then distributing them across the United States through dark web marketplaces, specifically Dream Market, where buyers and sellers use cryptocurrency and BitMessage accounts to keep everything anonymous. The whole setup ran under 2 fake business names, East Van Echo Tours and Bridge City Consulting LLP, shell identities built specifically to make drug shipments look like paperwork. The first package left Canada on September 27th of 2017 and was delivered in Georgia on October 11th. One Navy officer was dead shortly after. The second package went out October 6th and arrived October 13th. The second sailor died the same way. Both traced back to the same source. Now, sure, it's easy to get caught up wondering why these 2 Navy officers were using dark web fentanyl, but instead of focusing on their choices, we should look at the bigger picture. The story gets much more interesting when you pull the thread towards a source, particularly because the packaging found at the scene was a direct match for shipments coming out of West Vancouver, which happened to already be on the RCMP's radar for suspected drug trafficking. That's when the 2 investigations merged. The Americans brought in the DEA, Homeland Security, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, the FDA's Criminal Division, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. The Canadians had the RCMP's Federal Serious and Organized Crime Unit and the Calgary Police Service. They called it Operation Canada One. Over the following months, the RCMP intercepted several packages being shipped from the same address. In March of 2018, they moved in. Officers arrested both Federick and Nichols at the West Vancouver property and seized approximately 1.6 kilograms of fentanyl with a street value estimated at around $30 million. They also found mail tracking slips at the residence that matched the exact packaging recovered by American authorities at the scene of the 2 deaths. Nichols was deported back to the UK immediately since he'd been in Canada illegally. For Federic, it wasn't until May 24th of 2022 that he was arrested on a provisional US arrest warrant. Nichols was picked up in the UK the same day. Both were facing extradition to stand trial in a Georgia federal courtroom, charged with conspiracy to import controlled substances, conspiracy to distribute, and money laundering. If convicted, they're looking at a minimum of 10 years up to life.
Bro got an actual laundry list. Holy hell.
Woman tortured, murdered, and dumped by Japanese dark web criminals. There's a certain kind of evil.
I'm not gonna lie. Every time I hear Japan crimes, it's not some like, okay, I don't know how to say this without sounding like actually wild, but every time there's a crime, it's not like just the name of the thing that occurred. It's some like more egregious, 10 to 100 times worse than just the thing that happened. Like, it's not just somebody died. It's like some insane shit that led to somebody's death.
That doesn't come from one person alone. It gets built, meeting by meeting, message by message, until a group of people, some sick men in this case, talk each other into something they might have not done on their own. That's exactly what happened in Nagoya, Japan in the
It reminds me of the whale game incident
of 2007, and it started with a single post on an underground cell phone forum. Back on August 17th, a 40-year-old unemployed man named Kenji Kawagishi, who by the way was living out of a van, posted a message on a shady mobile web forum used for exchanging criminal information. The message implied robbery and that he was looking for partners. 3 men responded: Tsukasa Kandra, age 36, a newspaper salesman from Gunma Prefecture; Yoshimoto Hori, age 32, an unemployed darts player buried under 4 million yen in debt; and Yuichiro Hondo, age 29, who couldn't make rent. All 4 were desperate for cash, so they met in person on August 21st to figure out how to get it. The thing is, from the very first message, these men were performing for each other. Kanda told Kawagishi he'd committed homicide twice before. Even Hori wrote in an email that he'd just gotten out of prison. Both were lies told to seem harder, more dangerous, more committed than they actually were. Nobody wanted to be the one that backed down. That dynamic, that toxic competitive posturing between 4 broke strangers, is what prosecutors would later argue created the conditions for what followed. Anyway, their first robbery attempt failed. A second attempt, breaking into a plumber's office, fell apart when Kawagishi panicked and ran, leaving Hondo behind to get arrested. By the afternoon of August 24th, Kawagishi, Kanda, and Hori were back together in a video rental shop parking lot in Midori, Nagoya, with nothing to show for any of it. That's when Kanda proposed something worse: kidnap a woman walking alone, rob her, then kill her so she couldn't identify them. As hard as it is to believe, the other 2 actually agreed to the plan. That evening, the 3 men drove slowly through the Jiyogaoka neighborhood of Jikusa in Nagoya, searching for a target.
What?
Around 10 p.m., they spotted Rai Isogai, a 31-year-old office clerk walking home alone on a dark street. Kawagishi.
This is literally why your mom and dad or your relatives say women cannot walk on the roads alone at night. This is literally the definition of cannot walk alone unless you're a dude. Because who wants to talk to a dude? Who wants to interact with a dude? Unless, you know,
she got out of the van, approached her.
That dude is... You know what?
Asked for directions and forced her inside. There, they handcuffed her and threatened her with knives. They drove to a remote parking lot and forced her plan out of her. Just after midnight, Kawagishi attempted to rape her, and Kanda and Hori actually stopped him, but the attempt terrified Isogai so badly, she tried to escape the van.
Yeah, I know it's like something, but bro, every time I hear like the censored version of it and I see it on my screen, it feels like I'm getting a jump scare, and I jump every time. I don't know why. Every time I see that word, it makes me jump.
That's when they decided that she had to die. Despite her begging for her life, at around 1 a.m., they wrapped packing tape around her head. She was still alive. Kanda beat up her skull with a hammer approximately 30 times, while the others strangled her with a rope. They dumped her body in a forest in Mizunami at 4 in the morning, then went to try the ATM. And what happened? It declined every attempt. Turns out Isogai had given them the wrong pin. They split the 62,000 yen, roughly $400, found in her handbag, and made plans to do it again. A dumb decision that didn't happen because suddenly, Kawagishi turned himself in because he was afraid of being executed. All 3 were arrested on August 26th. At trial, none of them showed remorse. In fact, Kanda even started a blog claiming to tell the quote real story, and had the nerve to call Rai Isogai a liar. Anyway, for all that, he was sentenced to death. Now, it's quite rare for a single murder to result in the death penalty in Japan, but the community felt so strongly that they gathered 333,000 signatures.
What the fuck did I just fucking hear? So somebody died because they got murdered because of someone, and they get to live.
the death penalty in Japan, but the community felt so strongly that they gathered 333,000 signatures to ensure justice was served, and on June 25, 2015, Tsukasa Kanda was finally executed at the Nagoya detention house. 9 killed with a gun from the dark web. On July 22nd of 2016, David Ali Sanbali opened fire at the Olympia shopping mall in Munich. 9 people were killed, 27 more were wounded. Almost all of his victims were young people with a migrant background. Then he turned the gun on himself. 28 people died just like that. Now the gun, where did he get it from? You know, in the US, there's almost an automatic assumption that someone with a gun got it from a legit store. I mean, for the most part. But in this case, it was the opposite. Instead of the traditional ways, he'd found a seller on the dark web. A 33-year-old man named Philip Corbert, who was living in Marburg, a small university city about 100 kilometers north of Frankfurt. The two connected through encrypted dark web forums, negotiated a price, and met in person twice. First to hand over a Glock 17, then again for 350 rounds of ammunition. The total transaction cost around 8,000 euros. Now the background to these two guys is also an equally weird part. Corbett and Sanbali share almost identical ideological views, since both use the Nazi salute in their communications. Investigators even found a copy of Mein Kampf on Corbert's computer. The judge at trial flatly described Corbett as certainly a racist. Sanbali had specifically chosen July 22nd because it was the 5th anniversary of Anders Behring Breivik's massacre in Norway. So when Corbert's defense argued he had no idea what his buyer was planning, that landed pretty hollow in court. Police caught up with Corbett in August of 2016, about a month after the shooting. They tracked him down through his dark web activity and ran a sting operation posing as buyers looking for an automatic weapon and another Glock 17. He took the bait, showed up, and was arrested. During the sting, he reportedly confirmed to undercover officers that he had been the one to sell Sanbali the gun. While Corbett gave a full confession and expressed remorse. On January 19th of 2018, the Munich court sentenced him to exactly 7 years and 2 months, found guilty of 9 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 5 counts of bodily harm, and illegal weapons dealing. It was the first time in German legal history that an arms dealer was held criminally responsible for a mass shooting he didn't personally commit. But there was a third person in this story most people never heard about. The dark web forum where Corbett and Sanbali connected in the first place had an administrator, a 31-year-old man who had built and run the site where illegal weapons and drugs were openly traded. In December of 2018, a court in Karlsruhe convicted him on
I remember hearing about the dark web for the first time in like high school, and I was like, the dark web, and we were like, how do you access it? And then somebody was like, oh, this is how you do it. And I never like put 2 and 2 together into like realizing like how egregious that is and what was happening. But you know how I found out what it was? It wasn't even the dark web. It was literally Reddit on the other side of Reddit on r/dark web like discussions. It was like just disgusting things that happened on dark web. He just copy pasted a Reddit post. Like he just said what some bullshit someone posted on the dark web and just regurgitated because he was a Redditor. Like these things are like crazy.
Charges of negligent homicide.
Like how do you even end up on it? What situations are you even in that requires you to end up in this situation? Like how do you even find out the existence of this?
Negligent bodily harm, and facilitating the illegal sale of weapons and drugs. He was sentenced to 6 years. And almost death. Hired hitman to kill her lover's wife.
I think
Next case, and this one is a little different. Nobody died,
sure.
But it was a rather close shave,
okay.
And the person who tried to make it happen is, well, a lover. It's also sort of strange how casually people seem to stroll the dark web looking for hitmen as a service. You'll see that later in the video, but we found so many cases until we were kind of horrified. Anyway, meet Melody Sasser. 48 years old from Knoxville, Tennessee. By all appearances, just a regular person. She had a hiking hobby, a Match.com profile, and apparently some very serious feelings about a man she met on that app, a guy referred to in court documents as only DW. The backstory is that Sasser and DW connected on that site and became hiking friends. She helped him plan his Appalachian Trail hike, booking hostels, organizing rest stops, watching his vehicle while he was out on the trail. That's a level of investment that goes beyond friendship. Then, in the fall of 2022, DW called her with the news that he was engaged to someone else and moving to Alabama. Sasser's response, according to court documents, was, "I hope you both fall off a cliff and die." And then she got to work. She drove to the couple's Alabama residence. The new wife, referred to as JW, found that her car had been keyed. Then came the threatening phone calls made using a device to disguise her voice from untraceable computer-generated numbers. Sasser was also tracking both of them through Strava, yes, the fitness app, which synced their smartwatches and broadcast their location and routes. She then knew when JW went on a 2-mile walk. When all that didn't work to end their love, she decided it was time to escalate things. On January 11th of 2023, under the username Cattree, Sasser logged onto a dark website called Online Killers Market, a platform that allegedly offered hitmen for hire, along with hacking, kidnapping, extortion, asset attacks, and sexual violence. She uploaded a photo of JW, provided her name, her address, and paid the equivalent of $9,750 in Bitcoin with the instructions of, quoting, "It needs to seem random or accident, or plant drugs. Do not want a long investigation. She recently moved in with her new husband." Then she waited and got increasingly more frustrated. 2 months and 11 days after placing the order, she messaged the administrator again and eventually agreed to pay more, thinking that would make the job get done faster. What Sasser didn't know was that an outside law enforcement agency had already flagged the site and tipped off Homeland Security investigations in Birmingham, Alabama in April. Investigators pulled the messages, identified the target, and sent police patrols to JW's home in Prattville. When JW was told about the plot, she named Sasser immediately. The woman was arrested on May 18, 2023, and when investigators searched her home, they found a journal with a list of several other hitman websites written inside, in case this one didn't work. They also found a stack of cash sitting under a sticky note with a Bitcoin address on it. In September of 2024, Melody Sasser was sentenced to 100 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $5,389 in restitution directly to JW, who sure is alive, but she now knows that someone paid nearly $10,000, tracked her fitness routes, photographed her, and spent months checking in on a dark web site asking why she wasn't dead yet. That's the kind of thing that for sure stays with you. Dark web was a source of drugs for serial killing. Between 2014 and 2015, 4 young men in East London were murdered in almost identical fashion, drugged with GHB, and their bodies staged to look like accidental overdoses. Besides that, all 4 had done one thing in common. They met Stephen Port through a dating app, went to his apartment in Barking, and never came home. Port's weapon of choice was GHB, which stands for gamma hydroxybutyric acid, also called G on the street. Colorless and nearly tasteless, and at the right dose, completely incapacitating. A teaspoon is enough to knock a person out, a few more drops can be lethal. That margin, that razor-thin line between unconscious and dead, wasn't a problem Port was trying to avoid. According to survivors who later spoke to investigators, it was part of what he was after. Now, among the key questions was, how did he get that drug? Well, the dark web. He always sourced it through the dark web. His first victim was Anthony Walgate, age 23, a fashion student Port had hired through an escort website in June of 2014. Port gave him a fatal overdose of GHB, then dragged his body outside his apartment building and called emergency services, claiming he'd seen a stranger collapse. When police looked into it, Port told them Walgate had administered the drug himself. That lie worked. He was convicted of a minor offense and released on bail. 2 months later, Port invited Gabriel Kavari, age 22, a Slovakian man who had recently moved to London, to live in his flat. He drugged him, killed him, left the body in his apartment for several days, then moved it at night to a churchyard nearby. Police ruled it an accidental drug overdose. Less than a month after that, 23-year-old Daniel Whitworth, a chef Port met on a dating site, was dead in the same churchyard in the exact same spot as Kavari. Port had staged it with a planted fake note, written as though Whitworth was confessing to accidentally killing Kavari and taking his own life out of guilt. Then Port created a fake Facebook identity and fed that suicide narrative directly to Kavari's ex-boyfriend, who passed it on to the police as a witness. Officers believed it and closed the case. Almost a year passed until December of 2015, when Jack Taylor, age 25, a forklift driver, met Port on Grindr. His body turned up in the same churchyard, same staging and method. It was Taylor's sisters who refused to accept the accidental overdose conclusion and identified Port from CCTV footage captured the night before their brother's body was found. That's what finally led to his arrest. After his murders became public, investigators and journalists began uncovering that Port had been connected to an underground network operating on dark web platforms where GHB was spiking a community. One survivor, who spent months trying to infiltrate these networks after being spiked himself on a Grindr date, found forums that took weeks to gain access to, requiring members to prove their trustworthiness before being admitted. What he found inside was a structured subculture where members shared techniques for administering GHB without detection, things like you could mix it into lubricant, apply through massage oil, vaporize in the air alongside crystal meth to lower the victim's defenses. They even livestreamed victims losing consciousness and sold recordings of that. And to make it worse, they shared methods for accessing victims' phones to collect blackmail material to keep survivors from going to the police. Finally, Port was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole in November of 2016. Senior cop shot by kids hired from Russian dark web. Stories about cops making enemies on the job are not uncommon. That sort of comes with the job, especially when you spend years hunting the same person or people across international borders. But what happened to Lieutenant Colonel Yevgenia Shishkina in October of 2018 outside her home near Moscow was something investigators had genuinely never seen before. It was considered the world's first documented contract killing ordered through the dark web. Shishkina had been a police investigator since 1991. She'd worked her way up through the Russian Inferior Ministry, specializing in economic crimes, fraud, and drug trafficking. By all accounts, she was relentless, the kind of investigator who covered her desk in forum printouts and worked cases until they broke. Former colleagues described her as someone who didn't socialize at work, didn't take bribes, and didn't back down. Her son told the BBC she was, quote, looking for her own kind of justice. The man she had been hunting for years was a cyber fraudster named Yaroslav Sambayev, a hacker from Astrakhan who, along with 2 accomplices, had stolen 17.5 million rubles from 31 travel agencies by infiltrating their ticketing systems and redirecting funds. Shishkina had been building the case against them since
imagine being the one having to research this shit, bro.
2014. When Sambayev got wind of it, he cut off his house arrest bracelet and fled first to Montenegro, then Turkey, then Georgia, living under a fake Lithuanian passport and landing on Interpol's database. From abroad, he didn't go quiet. He sent Shishkina taunting messages from anonymous accounts, called her from unknown numbers, wrote on forums mocking her. He even sent someone to torch her car. Her bosses offered her a security detail, but she turned it down. The problem is that Sambayev stopped being just a hacker on the run. By the time he was hiding in Georgia, he had built something much larger. Under the pseudonym Miguel Morales, borrowed from the name of a notorious Mexican cartel leader, he ran a dark web drug retail operation called Los Zetas on Russia's largest illegal trading platform, Hydra. In under 2 years on the platform, the store completed more than 250,000 transactions. He had deputies, cashmen, regional coordinators, and a structured operation that investigators estimated brought in tens of millions of rubles a month. Keep that in mind because it leads up to August 2018 when a 17-year-old high school student from St. Petersburg, identified in court documents only as G, posted on Hydra looking for work. He was already one of Los Zetas' street-level coordinators, running drug drops around the city. A month after his post, someone reached out through private messages. The offer was 1 million rubles, roughly 12,000 pounds, to have a police investigator killed. Shishkina's name, home address, and personal details arrived via telegram. G kept 400,000 rubles and brought in his neighbor, 19-year-old Abdulaziz, a first-year medical student he'd met on a basketball court. Abdulaziz thought it over for 2 weeks and then he agreed. He told G the reason he was traveling to Moscow was to attend a concert by his favorite rapper. He bought his outfit for the killing at a discount store named Season. He learned to load the gun by watching YouTube videos in his hotel room. Then he traveled from St. Petersburg to Moscow on a BlaBlaCar rideshare. He retrieved the murder weapon, a modified pistol from a stash hidden in a wooded area outside the city, the location sent to him by G over Telegram. He booked a hotel in Krasnogorsk on Avito and paid with a credit card. On the morning of October 10th, 2018 at 6:30, Abdulaziz approached Shishkina outside her apartment building. She spotted him drawing the weapon and began fighting back. He slipped, caught himself on his left hand, and fired from the hip onto her stomach. Then he got up and shot her in the neck. She died in her husband's arms. Abdulaziz walked 2 blocks, ordered a Yandex taxi on his phone, and went to the concert. He posted a video from it on Instagram that night. You might not believe it, but it was apparently the taxi record that unraveled him. Police pulled up every ride-hailing trip logged in the area that morning, traced it back to his phone, and 5 months later, both he and G were arrested in St. Petersburg. At their first interrogation, they described the entire chain, making this the first confirmed contract killing ever arranged and executed through the dark web. Sambayev was arrested in Georgia months later, carrying a fake passport and a pistol, and of course, he denied any connection to the murder. Husband lurked in the dark web so much, he killed his wife.
What?
Now let's head to the States, specifically to Cottage Grove, Minnesota. Smallish town where nothing much happens that is worth the big news, and where a man could spend years building a reputation as a devoted husband, father, you know, the average good guy. That was Stefan Allwine, and for a long time it worked. His wife Amy Allwine was a dog trainer, a mother deeply embedded in her church community, and people loved her. So when she started receiving anonymous death threats in 2016, detailed, specific, relentless messages warning her that someone had been hired to kill her, she did exactly what you're supposed to do. She went to the FBI. The messages were designed to psychologically destroy her. One of them read, "Commit. If you do not, then you will slowly see things taken away from you, and each time you will know you could have stopped it, which will eat you apart from the inside." Investigators traced the threats to a dark website called Besa Mafia, a fake murder-for-hire platform that took large sums of Bitcoin from people who wanted someone killed, pocketed the money, and never sent anyone. Someone had paid thousands of dollars in cryptocurrency to have Amy gone. Because Besa Mafia was a scam, no hitman ever showed up. The investigation stalled, and Amy meanwhile tried to move forward with her life, shaken but alive. What she didn't know was that the person who had paid for her death was sitting right across from her at the dinner table. On November 13th of 2016, Stefan Allwine called 911 in a trembling voice to report he had come home from running errands with their 9-year-old son to find Amy dead in their bedroom with a 9mm pistol near her body. He told dispatchers it looked like she had shot herself. Given the threats she had been receiving, he suggested that the fear had finally broken her. Investigators were skeptical within minutes. First, because the gun had been placed in Amy's non-dominant hand, and there was no gunpowder residue on either hand, meaning she hadn't pulled the trigger. Also, not a single drop of blood was on the weapon, and someone had cleaned up a pool of blood at the scene before officers arrived. Then the toxicology report came back. Amy's system contains scopolamine, a drug that induces heavy sedation and confusion bought by Stefan online. Investigators believe he drugged her first, then staged the entire scene. When FBI forensic analysis pulled the Bitcoin transaction records, the trail from Besa Mafia led directly back to Stefan's IP address, the threatening messages Amy had been receiving for months, the ones that had sent her to the FBI in terror. Stefan had written every single one of them. He had spent months making his own wife believe a professional killer was coming to kill her, while simultaneously trying to make that actually happen. And it did. But why? Well, the motive prosecutors presented at trial had two layers. Privately, Stefan had been an active user of Ashley Madison, an affair website. He was living a completely separate life behind the image of a devoted church deacon. But there was also a more straightforward financial calculation. Amy had a $700,000 life insurance policy, and Stefan was the sole beneficiary. In January of 2018, the jury convicted him of first-degree premeditated murder, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Alright guys, that's gonna be
It's scary that these people actually exist in real life. I honestly couldn't say, I didn't know what to say honestly. It was so crazy.
It would be awesome if you could subscribe. And like I said at the beginning, if you want to check out my second channel where I show off more of my personality, then head over to Tubbington. I'm sure the button will be somewhere on the screen. But with that being said, I will see you guys next time I upload.
Now this is like his thing. He uploads like creepypastas and stuff. It started with creepypastas and then it went to the iceberg and then it became something else.